Good afternoon. I'm Alan Solomont, the Dean of Tufts University's Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life, and I want to welcome you to our second virtual Civic Life Lunch, a conversation with Amanda Litman, Executive Director of Run for Something. Before we get started, I want to say to all members of the Tufts community, but especially to students, we miss you on campus. We hope you are safe and healthy, and we're thinking of you and your families. We were looking forward to hosting Amanda on campus earlier this semester, and we still hope to bring her to Tufts in the future. But for now, I'm grateful that she can join us virtually, and I'm grateful to everyone watching for staying engaged in civic life during these difficult times. I also want to thank a friend of Tisch College, Chris Caneb, for connecting us with Amanda in the first place. Thank you, Chris. At Tisch College, we have been hard at work trying to adapt to these new circumstances and helping the university respond to the pandemic. We have recruited hundreds of volunteers who receive weekly emails with opportunities to volunteer remotely to support organizations and communities who need help. We are also offering financial grants to students to undertake summer projects directly related to addressing the impact of COVID-19. So if you have an idea about how you can help, either by designing a new project or joining an existing effort, go to the Tisch College website, tischcollege.tufts.edu, and apply for one of these grants. We have switched all of our summer internships for Tisch Summer Fellows to remote work, which has allowed us to partner with more organizations and to offer more opportunities for which students can apply right now. I encourage you to explore our website, tischcollege.tufts.edu, to learn more about all of these and other opportunities. This is our second Civic Life Lunch that is being broadcast online. The first was a conversation focused on federal and state responses to COVID-19. And we were honored to hear from United States Congresswoman Catherine Clark and from Massachusetts State Representative John Santiago, who is also an emergency room physician at Boston Medical Center. If you missed it, I encourage you to watch the full video of that event, which is available on our YouTube channel. Today, we shift gears from the elected officials of today to the elected officials of the future. Amanda Litman is the co-founder and executive director of an organization called Run for Something. It is a political action committee that recruits and supports young, diverse, progressive candidates to run for down-ballot offices. Amanda is a graduate of Northwestern University and a veteran of several state and national campaigns. In 2012, she worked as an email writer for Barack Obama's presidential campaign. In 2014, she was digital director for Charlie Crist's gubernatorial campaign in Florida. And in 2016, she was the email director for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. In 2017, she co-founded Run for Something, which has helped more than 300 young people win elected office across the country. Her book, Run for Something, a real talk guide to fixing the system yourself, was published by Simon & Schuster. Amanda has also published pieces on BuzzFeed, In the Nation, Teen Vogue, Vanity Fair, and more. In 2018, she and Run for Something were named one of Politico's 50 Ideas Driving Politics. I'm going to start today's conversation with a few questions of my own, and then we'll open it up to questions from other participants. We'll use Zoom's Q&A feature, so keep an eye on the chat box for instructions on how to submit your question. And now let me welcome Amanda Litman.
Hi, I'm so excited to do this. This is my favorite thing to do.
Well, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us. So tell us about Run for Something and why you started it.
So Run for Something came out of the ashes of the 2016 election. About a week after Election Day, I got a Facebook message from somebody I knew from college hey, Amanda, you've been posting about politics. You seem to know this world. You're the only person I know who does this. I want to run for office in Chicago, where I live, and I'm a public school teacher. If Trump can do this, seems like anybody can. What do I do? And I did not have an answer for him, because at the time, if you were young, if you were newly excited about politics, and if you wanted to do more than just vote or volunteer, if you wanted to actually lead, there was nowhere you could go that would help you. So I sent an email to a whole bunch of people I knew saying, I have an idea. Let's create an organization that can solve this problem. One of those folks was the wife of my now co-founder, Ross Morales-Ricchetto. Ross has been working in campaigns for about 15 years. We wrote a plan, we built a website, and we figured we'll launch the sort of side project on Inauguration Day. We thought we'd get 100 people who want to run in the first year. Instead, we had 1,000 people sign up in the first week. And as of today, we're up to about 51,000 young people across the country who've told us they want to run. I want to shut my back door because I think there's some construction noise, but ask your next question.
Okay. So the student body at Tufts is politically very active. They canvass, they phone bank, and they get out and vote. But many feel that running for office is beyond their reach, beyond their level of experience and expertise. What do you say to our students who would consider running for office, but may feel it isn't their time?
I think it's worth keeping in mind that most offices are not federal. There are 500,000 elected offices in the United States, more than that, in fact. There are, in fact, more elected offices in the United States than there are McDonald's employees in this country, which is just like a fun stat, I think, gives sense of the
Yes,
scale we're working with here. Most of those are not federal. In fact, 99.5% are non-federal. They're not statewide. They're things like water board, library board, school board, university boards of regents are often elected positions, community college boards, state house, state senate, county and city clerk. The kinds of positions that are seemingly small in scale, but incredibly huge in impact. And I say this to note that when people think about running for office, usually the only thing they consider is like Congress or Senate or president. And of course that feels out of reach, because that feels like something, and it is something that you often need to raise a lot of money for. You need to be a full-time candidate to do, and you need experience. School board, city council, state leg, these are the entry points. These are the places where people get the experience they need. 75% of school board races cost $1,000 or less. 85% cost $5,000 or less. These races are small, they're affordable, they are incredibly important, and they are races that you can absolutely win if you're willing to put in the work. So if you are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 27, 28, doesn't really matter how old you are, assuming you meet the age requirement, which for some races there are, you might have to be 18 or 21, or oddly, to run for governor of Oklahoma, you need to be 31, I believe. It's one of those weird facts.
Number.
I don't know, Oklahoma, weird state. Whatever that age requirement is, assuming you meet that, there is no other requirement for how long your resume needs to be or what other experience you need. If you're willing to knock doors, or in our new pandemic era, connect with as many people as possible in whatever ways make sense, you can absolutely run and win. Especially if you're willing to out-hustle your opponents, which, as I've seen and I have found, are younger candidates. Run for something exclusively works with people ages 18 to 40, running for things like school board, state house, state senate, city council, everything local. Our candidates who are willing to do the work tend to be the ones who have the strongest rationale for running, which are often the people who are 18, 19, 20, 21, and are furious at a problem they're not seeing solved.
Well, I want to give a shout out to two of our colleagues that we're very proud of. One, Jen Mcandrew, our Director of Communication Strategy and Planning, is a member of the school board in Melrose, and our Director of Development and Alumni Relations was on the school board in Lynnfield, Massachusetts.
Amazing.
Let me ask you a personal question. Have you ever thought of running for anything yourself, or might you in the future?
I chewed on it for a hot minute, but ultimately what I landed on is that I think you need to run for office to solve a problem, or to take care of a passion project that you believe the platform you're running for lets you solve. For me, the problem I care about solving is this one, is a lack of local leadership across the country, of Democrats who share my values, of a lack of party infrastructure to support those candidates. of when I looked to the future of the Democratic Party at least 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't see leaders I was excited about. Now that's not the case. And the ones I'm excited about are the candidates we've worked with over the last 3 years. So this is the problem I want to solve and the platform that lets me solve it. We'll see what the future holds. But for now, I have the best job in politics. So I'm not leaving it anytime soon.
Well, I understand that your politics lean in the progressive direction. What would you say to a young person who happens to be a Republican about running for office?
You should do it, if only because we need smart, sane, capable Republicans in office too.
Yep.
We need people of both parties who are willing to be actors in good faith, who are willing to depend on the same agreement of truth and facts. I am a Democrat. Our organization works with Democrats. I believe that the democratic values are where the country is headed, but there will always be an opposition party. And if we're going to have an opposition party, I want it to be one that is working with good faith. So if you're a young Republican who is ready to be that kind of partner in governing, then you should absolutely run. We need more of you.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. So a large part of the support that Run for Something offers its candidates is advice and mentorship from alumni and from experts, so that no one feels they are running alone. And as we adjust to social distancing and this life apart from one another, how's your organization ensuring that these vital connections are maintained?
Excuse me. So the first thing we did, maybe in week 1 or week 2 of the pandemic here in the States, was roll out a website called resourcesforcampaigns.com. On that website, it includes materials and trainings and guides from more than 40 other organizations. We're updating it at this point daily, every other day when we have new materials. We're vetting everything that goes on there. The goal here is that nobody knows how to do this. And we're not going to pretend we know how to do this. But there's a lot of material out there on how to navigate some of these tactics that we've tried in various forms. So things like one-on-one calls with volunteers online, virtual fundraisers, digital organizing, online ads, online town halls, different tools you can use, how to get them for free, that kind of thing. So that was, I think, the first part of our program to support candidates right now. The second was facilitating community relationships. We did a survey of our candidates after 2018, and 60% of them identified a relationship with another candidate as their greatest source of resiliency. Knowing someone else who's doing something that's so damn hard is a really powerful thing, because running for office is incredibly difficult and it's very lonely, especially if you are someone who is counter to the norm of the kind of politician people usually see. So a young woman, young person of color, young LGBTQ person in a place where you might not know very many people who look like you or with your experience running. So we have done that in the past through, we have a Slack team, we have a Facebook group, we do calls, but over the last month, we've really rolled out even more of these and been more concerted in their focus. So just earlier this week or late last week, who knows, we did a call with parents who are running for office, and we had about a dozen parents join a video chat. It was off the record. And it was really meant to be like a candid conversation about how is it going? What are you trying? What's working for you? How? And really just like a venting session. And we have more of these scheduled over the next month or two, ranging from LGBT folks running in red states to people running for city council, to people running in competitive state legislative races, to folks running in Miami, trying to be really intentional about building community in ways big and small, with the goal being that those group conversations are just starting points, is that people can share contact information, people can take it from there and stay in touch however they need. And the third component, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you have a pretty strong group here in Massachusetts and in this area of people.
We do. Yeah. We have a bunch of folks on the Cambridge City Council. We have a bunch of folks in the Massachusetts State House and State Senate, and the State House and State Senate. Becca Rauch, who I believe is your state senator. Yeah.
We just spoke on the phone last week.
She's wonderful. And a lot of those folks, those electeds, make up the third part of our program here, which is our alumni mentorship program. So people who've run before, every 4 to 6 weeks, we do a new endorsement class. So those are the people that we've really winnowed in on, that we're spending a lot of time with, that our staff are focusing in on. We then match those newly endorsed candidates with alumni from previous classes, folks who've already gone through election day. And those are one-on-one matches made very intentionally. So we had for example, we worked with Eli, I forget, Eli Sabin, I believe, who was running for New Haven alderman, New Haven City Council. We connected him with a young woman. He was maybe 18, 19. We connected him with a young woman of similar age who'd been running for city council in Madison, Wisconsin. Because two college students figuring out how do you handle classes and campus life and campaigning and then governing, one who had gone through it the cycle before. And we make those kinds of matches every month to ensure that people are talking to someone who's sort of been through the bullshit before. That has been, I think, the third and, in fact, most powerful component of our program, if only because it continues facilitating a network of leaders who stay in touch after the election, which means win or lose, they're sharing best practices on policy. They're sharing best practices on how to navigate life after a campaign, of what do you do to wind down your organization or keep it going if you want to run again. So that has been one of my favorite things to see.
By the way, when you list your resources, feel free to post our youth data site, youthdata.circle.tufts.edu. People can get information about young voters in every state in the country, every congressional district, and every county. Excuse me, that little commercial. In any event, Run for Something is all about championing young, progressive, diverse candidates with deep ties to their communities. Another quality, though, that you look for in potential candidates is the X factor. Could you explain what the X factor is and how folks who want to run for office can develop it in themselves?
Yeah, the X factor, it's one of those things you know when you see it, but I will say some of the components of it include a really strong rationale for running. The number one question a candidate is going to get is, why are you doing this? So we're looking for people who can articulate that. They don't have to be the most eloquent or the most well-researched in terms of policy, but if you can clearly tell a story of why you care about this and why you're willing to sacrifice so much and why people should trust you to solve it, we have found that makes candidates more successful, if only for the fact that it is the core North Star of a campaign. When you have that rationale for running, your campaign is then left to make decisions of how do we communicate it, not what are we communicating in the first place. So I think that is a really important point. The second component of sort of X factor, as well as to listen and to learn. People who admit they know what they don't know is really important, especially in politics, where none of this is rocket science, but it's also heavily built on some institutional memory in terms of how do you get the list of voters you need to talk to? What do you do once you have it? What is the least painful software to use to process it? Things like that. It's not intellectually difficult, but there are some tricks of the trade, so to speak, that do make it easier and make it more efficient. So acknowledging that you don't have every answer in terms of campaign mechanics, but also in terms of policy, you don't need to have every solution, but you do need to be willing to do this, to find the solutions and listen to those who do. The third thing I think makes a really strong candidate is someone who acknowledges how hard it is. I very strongly believe, and our organization very strongly believes, that while we want to make sure that every person considers running for office, that everyone knows that running for office is an option for them, we're not here to actually beg and plead and convince someone to run for office. And that's, I think, an important distinction. Campaigning is terrible. Running for office is really hard. And being an elected official is, if possible, even harder. It is a huge sacrifice. We want someone who really wants it for the right reasons, going back to point number one, but who knows what they're getting into eyes wide open and wants to do it anyway. So to that point, someone who's really got that hunger is going to be better than someone who sort of gets dragged kicking and screaming into it.
Yep. Well, great advice, and good for you for showing so much respect for the people who are willing to do this. So as the COVID-19 pandemic changes daily life around the world, campaigns are having to shift themselves to new platforms, to digital platforms and tactics. Is this an opportunity for this generation that's grown up on the internet? But what are the trade-offs in transitioning from door-to-door tactics to an online environment?
Well, I think it is inherently easier for people who've grown up online. There goes my dog waking up from her little nap.
Okay. Sadie, right?
Sadie, yeah. Good morning.
Okay.
Good dog. I think we've run into, I would say anecdotally, I have heard from folks who work with some older elected officials or more experienced elected officials who needed help setting up Zoom calls and figuring out how to use, FaceTime the right way, and what did it mean to do an Instagram live. There's sort of like a fluency here where for us, I'm 30 years old. People who really grew up on the internet, it's like a second language we've learned from childhood, so it's not that hard to understand how it translates to a different context. So I think in that sense it's a little bit easier. I think it is certainly it's a changing campaign tactic that everybody is navigating. The reason that door-to-door knocking is so effective, and why especially local races are won lost by candidates knocking doors, is because it builds a relationship, a personal relationship with a voter. And that relationship is built on knowing one another, it's built on trust, it's built on authenticity, it's built on being genuine and listening. And what we're trying to do now is coach candidates and work with candidates to find, how do you replicate those emotions while staying true to the platforms that we have available? So what does it mean to build a genuine relationship with someone on an Instagram live? What does it mean to be authentic and connect with someone meaningfully over text message? And that looks different on each platform, but the emotional goal remains the same. So it's not trying to replicate the door knock, it's trying to replicate the emotional experience of the door knock, if that makes sense. I think it's certainly easier for young people, in part because we're just more comfortable with it. But that is not to say that older folks and older candidates can't also do it. But the technical piece there is a little bit easier. Anyone who's ever had to set up a Zoom call with your grandparents knows it just takes a little while.
You're hurting me, Amanda. You're hurting me.
Every time I do presentations, my dad always asks me, "What do you have against old white men?" It's like, nothing. You've had your time in the sun enough. I think it is really important. The other component here, and I know you didn't ask about this, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot, is as we've seen on the elected official side, the generational divide is massive. We have seen millennial and Gen Z leaders who've been elected be really proactive in terms of mitigating the damage, of passing legislation to creatively solve problems, of connecting with voters in a really meaningful way, or constituents in a really powerful way. From Chloe Maxman in Maine, who has texted or called every senior in her district, to Lena Hidalgo, the Harris County judge, who's 29 years old. She's running the county that Houston is in. She is the reason that Houston is the only place in Texas that is flattening the curve. Everywhere else, cases are going up. In Houston, where Lena was the one to sign the shelter-at-home order, where Lena is the one requiring masks, and Lena is the one who helped pass more funding to send every voter in Harris County a ballot for November and July's runoffs. She's 29 years old, and we have seen this across the country. The elected officials who are a little bit younger, and I think this sort of replicates the generational divide we're seeing more broadly, are taking it really seriously and are leading in a really powerful way, whereas, God bless them, some of the older electeds, and I think the Las Vegas mayor we saw on the news a couple weeks ago was a really perfect example of this, are not. So that, I think, is also a generational divide here that is sort of born out of the understand the seriousness of the moment and the way that people are responding to it.
Well, I'm evidence that you can teach an old dog new tricks. I did not know how to use Zoom 6 weeks ago, and I'm now on several Zoom calls a day, and I think I've been able to guide this one reasonably, although there are a lot of people backing us up. So just before I open up the conversation to students, if there's a student or a young person or anyone on the line today who wants to run for something, how do they get in touch with you?
Bunch of ways. First, you should go to runforwhat.net. This is our website that allows you to enter your full address wherever you want to run, and we'll show you available offices for 2020. And as soon as we pass through the 2025 cycle, 2021 elections. If you sign up there, you'll get into our pipeline. You'll get regular contact about trainings, resources, webinars. You can join a conference call. You can talk to our staff. You can also follow us on social. We're on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr. That might be it at the moment. YouTube probably too. So those are good places, and we're really responsive. We try very hard. And if you have a question that you're not seeing answered on our website, which is runforsomething.net, just shoot us an email, hello@runforsomething.net, and our staff will get back to you in a day or two.
That's great. That's great. Well, I hope people are listening to that and that somebody will take you up on it.
Me
So
too.
now let's open up the conversation to students who are on the call. So let me just say, as you pop up to ask your question, please remember, introduce yourselves. Let us know your name, your class year, what school at Tufts you're from, and if you wish, where you are currently located. Please ask your question, no stories or personal anecdotes, but if you're thinking of running for something, you might add that. So go ahead. Let's hear from our first questioner.
Hi, I'm Harisa LaForce. I am a senior in the School of Arts and Sciences. And my question for you is regarding the candidate vetting process as the exec director for Run for Something. So my question is, what are you taking into account when considering a progressive candidate, especially when they're challenging a Democratic incumbent or you see multiple requests running for the same role? And how does that criteria change depending on where and who they're competing against for office?
It's a really good question. We look for people who first meet our initial sort of demographic screen. So under 40, first or second time candidates running in a state, legislative or more local race, and running as a progressive. For us, we have a set of value statements we stand by. They're very basic progressive values: pro-choice, pro-equality, pro-tolerance, pro-working families, pro-criminal justice reform, voting rights reform, gun violence prevention, unions, immigration reform, and climate change is real. We have a responsibility to do something about it. That's the one I was missing. Those are basic values, and they feel pretty simple for folks to meet, and that's intentional. We don't want to be the litmus test on what kind of policy positions people hold. We also, because we work with such a range of offices and a range of states, we have to be flexible, and we can't demand that everyone have a position on a policy thing that might not be relevant to their community. From there, we consider every application for endorsement. Everyone who comes through our pipeline gets access to a whole bunch of passive resources, things on our website, webinars, trainings, that kind of thing. The folks that we endorse are the people that our staff spend a lot of time with. Those are the ones we connect with alumni. Those are the ones that we recommend to other organizations and to press. Those are the people that we can track wins and losses of. Endorsement applications include: what's your campaign plan? What's your budget? What's your win number? How are you going to get from A to Z? We want to make sure people have a vision for how they're going to campaign, and really that they're focusing on voter contact. From there, every application gets reviewed by a vetting service. So we do deep background checks, for public record searches, social media scrubs. We have state leads in every state who review every application to give us local political context. And then we have staff that review every application and that take into account any other places we've gotten feedback from them. So, if one of our volunteers did an interview with them, if one of our state leads has something to say, that's where that decision gets made. We are really looking for people running grassroots-driven campaigns who are doing voter contact, who are interesting and compelling, who have that X factor. We're especially looking for people who from underrepresented communities, so women, people of color, LGBT people, underrepresented backgrounds, so people who are not necessarily a traditional politician. We absolutely do endorse people running against one another. We take our endorsement as a position of we want to make sure that every candidate is empowered to run a really good campaign. And it would be the height of hubris for us to say we know which one should win. But we want to trust voters, and we want to empower campaigns to do good work to inform voters, if that makes sense. So it's not like Planned Parenthood, where a Planned Parenthood endorsement indicates someone is good on the issues, or good on the issues that are important to Planned Parenthood. For us, our endorsement tells you that this is a person running a good campaign that has no obvious flags in their background, that shares basic progressive values, and that you should consider as someone who's worth taking a second look at. We, especially for people running against Democratic incumbents, we want to make sure you're running a positive, vision-driven campaign, and not just I'm different than this person, but I am different than this person because of the positive vision I see for our community that they're not fulfilling. We are especially looking for people who are running, well, not looking for people, but we're more excited to engage with people who are running against Democratic incumbents who have been there for a long time and haven't been delivering for their community, especially if it's young women or young people of color running against older folks who may not be as representative of their community. And I will say, anecdotally, we have often found that when we're working with challengers of Democratic incumbents, the state party or the county party will come to us and say, we can't publicly say anything, but thank God you're doing it. That dude has been in that seat for 20 years. He's like a mess waiting to happen. There's a scandal behind every door, but we can't actively engage in challenging him. So glad you can. Is that helpful?
I'm not going to ask you to name any names.
I couldn't if I wanted to, but ooh, man, some of these dudes.
That's a good question and a good answer. Our next student.
Hi, my name's Griffin Saul. I'm a rising senior at Tufts majoring in political science. I'm also a former intern and alum of OFA, so I'm really excited to meet you virtually. The question I want to ask as an activist and someone who, like you, has and wants to continue to build and work to build social movements, how did you bring the idea of Run for Something as an organization from idea to fruition? So, like, what were some of the steps you took? What did you find that worked? What didn't work? Any other general advice or guidance that you really see for fellow young activists who are trying to aid in the progressive movement?
This is a really good question because some of it, okay, so part of it was having a really good plan. My co-founder and I sat down and started with the problem we wanted to solve, the tactics the strategies we wanted to use to solve it, the tactics we would use to accomplish those strategies, and what were the ways we were going to measure our success. So that, I think, was part one, was like really nailing down on the problem and solution and limiting our scope in a certain sense. We didn't try to bite off more than we thought we could chew. Like, we're not going to try and get 25-year-olds to run for Congress. I don't think most people should run for Congress. I think Congress is kind of a waste of time, but that's a separate conversation. I think for us, it was really being intentional about our scope and knowing where we could have influence. Second was really knowing the rules so that we could understand what rules we could break, and questioning some of the assumptions around those rules. So really understanding how candidate recruitment had worked in the past so that we could know where the problems were in that process, like what lenses were people using in candidate recruitment that were so problematic, taking a look at the structural barriers that were in place for young people to run for office, and like, why were they there? How did they get there? Was it intentional? Was it an impact of scarcity of resources? Is a little bit of both. I think, I've read like a lot about civic hacking, because it's something I'm really fascinated in my spare time. And I think one of the things that is really common in that conversation is like, you really have to understand the rules in order to break them. And I think this is particularly true when you're starting a new activist organization or a new political organization. Knowing the institutions and how they work together and the relationships that people have that facilitate the work allows you to understand how your work fits in, because no work in a political space happens in a vacuum. Part of this, but just a nature of my partner and I's networks. I've worked on 2 presidential campaigns. Those are like going to college. So you end up with a big alumni network. I'm part of these networks of, at this point, tens of thousands of staffers who have engaged in this work and I can pretty easily access, and many of whom could help at a time when we needed help to launch. And my partner similarly has those kinds of networks. And that's just by having done the work for a little bit. In terms of like the literal day-by-day mechanics, we wrote a plan, we built a website, we had a way to take in money. We got volunteer legal help to open the bank accounts and file the paperwork. We got a little volunteer PR help to pitch it to Politico. We knew that one of the first things we would need on day one is some kind of credibility of validation. So we had an informal board of advisors who would put their name to it on day one and say, like, stamp of approval. That included Jen O'Malley Dillon, who's like now the Biden campaign manager. And
who's a Tufts alum, in case people don't know that.
And many others of whom like had credibility, not just with within the broader political circle, but within press, with donors, that kind of thing. The final piece here was that we took on some risk. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any guarantee that this would be a thing that we could make money from or pay ourselves from. In the first, our operating expenses on day one were like the website, the legal fees, and server costs. So it was a couple $1,000, and it was all on my credit card. And we ran some ads, which also went on my credit card. And we pretty quickly online raised about $30,000 in the first couple of days, which allowed me to move that off my credit card, which was nice. But it was risky, and it was something that we had the privilege of doing. So being really intentional and thoughtful about the privilege that it has to launch an organization, especially without a millionaire partner in these efforts, which, as you look back on some of the organizations that have been started over the last couple of years, many of them often have a very wealthy person as part of that initial launching point, which makes it much easier for people like us who don't have that kind of support. There's still an amount of privilege involved here, but it's not fun. It's not easy. It is meaningful, but it is very hard.
Thank you. Next questioner.
Hi, Amanda. My name is Zach. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. So my question for you is, this is a really important job, and I'm just curious what for you has been the most rewarding aspect of this work, maybe what has been maybe more of a challenge for you?
The most rewarding part is the candidates. The people who are willing to change their lives, change their careers, blow up their conception of the future, sacrifice so much because they believe that there is a problem worth solving and they need to be the ones to solve it. It is so incredibly inspiring to work with them. My job in particular does not have as much day-to-day involvement with candidates. A lot of what I do as the executive director is travel around the country and raise money and talk to press, which is kind of fun because it's like gossiping, but mostly it's traveling the country and raising money. And the best part of that was getting to meet candidates who would come to our events and to sit down with them and hear their stories and watch them then stand up in front of a room full of people and inspire. And then over the course of years, the ones that I've met, staying in touch with them, getting to see them then govern and lead and, in Virginia, pass the Equal Rights Amendment like Jennifer Carroll Foy did. And now she's running for governor. And isn't that awesome? Having been a part of her work since day one and her race in 2017, it is really, really gratifying. The part that is really challenging, I would say if anyone has ever managed a team knows that managing is hard, just by necessity. But raising money is really difficult. I will be very candid with you, Zach, that fundraising is terrible and it is part of the job. And that I have found many of our donors to be wonderful people who really care. And many are crazy people who are delightful in their own ways. So, but it's hard. Every 2 weeks we got to pay people on our staff and somehow we're going to have to find the money. So,
well, as somebody who's done a little of that work, I can vouch for it. We have one last question from a student. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Nicholas. I'm a graduate student at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and I finished a master's program yesterday, and I'll be staying on as a PhD student next year. I have a question about our generation, who a lot of us have moved around a lot, chasing education or employment opportunities. And for these local offices, we might be motivated by larger national or global issues, but we have to translate them into something that's pressing and relatable to a local constituency. What are the best practices that you see in people who are developing that kind of rapport and legitimacy and sense of belonging in a place where they might be a transplant or might not automatically look like or resonate with the voters there?
It's a really good question. Something we say to folks who are thinking about how do I run for office in a couple of years in a community I've just moved to for school or for work, is to show up. It's a little harder right now given the way that what showing up looks like, but being present. In the before times, I might have suggested going to city hall, city council, school board meetings every month, volunteering on local campaigns, get to know the people who do this work, already, because they are the ones that you're going to need help with when you decide to run. They're going to be the ones that can give you a sense of the landscape, and they're the ones that will help you figure out how to translate these issues. Even now, what does it mean to show up in a local way? Become a part of the mutual aid network in your community. I live in Brooklyn. I have a little backyard. We're very lucky we have a little garden. And I was listening to some of my neighbors shout at each other over the gardens. Did you see what that guy posted on Nextdoor? Yeah, no, I'm not on Nextdoor. Should I get on Nextdoor? Yeah, man, you got to be on Nextdoor. I just picked up this great, yelling at each other over the fences about Nextdoor. And it makes me laugh because my fiance and I love Nextdoor. It's so fun to see how the local community interacts. But that's an example.
What's Nextdoor?
Oh, Nextdoor is the best. Okay, so Nextdoor is a social media network entirely built around neighborhoods or communities. So if you go to their website, you sign up, they mail you a postcard with a code that verifies you of having lived in that neighborhood, and you join the community, and it's entirely locals. So like my Nextdoor for our like little Carroll Gordon's Red Hook area of Brooklyn this is the laundromat that's issuing masks right now for free. You can go pick them up. Hey, I found a lost cat. Anyone seen it? Mrs. Jones at 253 Smith Street is having trouble getting groceries. Can someone go help her out? Stuff like that. It's often also crazy people complaining about like noise complaints and sometimes some vaguely racist stuff, but it's often very entertaining. And I think it's the kind of social network that's really locally based. So similarly, Facebook groups that are local, subreddits that are local. I don't know about you, but like I see these flyers all around my neighborhood for, Carroll Gardens network of neighbors helping neighbors, that kind of thing. Join the Slack team, get on the listserv. Those are the kinds of virtual communities you can join even now and help. Be present, be active, be a member of your community. That's one way in which you can understand the problems people are facing and then get to know the people you're going to need when you want to run. So it both feels good and it's a little bit transactional. Things can be both at the same time. I think in terms of how you translate national issues into a local thing, it depends on the issue that you care about. But most big problems have local solutions. For example, we worked with a guy in Blue Springs, Missouri, whose pet issue was climate change. What that looked like in practice was getting the city, Blue Springs, Missouri, to move all of their electricity over to solar. And that's the thing that the city council had control over. Similarly, Waterloo, Iowa, a city council candidate we worked with there, had them issue a resolution his first week on the city council declaring a climate emergency and setting out that Waterloo, Iowa was going to have a plan to mitigate climate change. We've had folks have their cities join the Paris Accords. Does it make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things? Well, everything matters in the grand scheme of things. You never know, more is more. Especially on things like women's reproductive rights, on LGBT equality. We've even seen sort of random offices have ways of showing these positions. My favorite example here is we worked with a guy running for coroner in Jefferson County, Colorado in 2018. Dana Hutchinson. He looked like a coroner, if you know what I mean. He was really passionate, really smart. He had a degree in forensic science. His issue, the reason he was running, is because the coroner of Jefferson County, Colorado, was misgendering trans people after death on their death certificates. He did not believe that transgender identity was something that was valid or legitimate. So the coroner was misgendering people. That is problematic in any number of ways, not the least of which is there is dignity in both living and dying, but also gender and gender identity on a death certificate influences crime reporting and homicide stats and suicide stats, all of which especially over-index in the transgender community. So Dana saw that and said, I'm going to run and take the thing that I care about, which is, LGBT issues, and this is the place I can make a difference here. He didn't win, but even bringing that issue to the forefront and showing how you can make your progressive values present in an office where it doesn't seem like progressivism has any place is so important. So I think there is always a way you can find the issue that you care about on the grand scheme to move it forward on the local level.
That's great. So I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up. Before we do, Amanda, I want to give you one last chance to tell students who are listening how they can how they can reach you or reach Run for Something if they're interested? Could you repeat?
Best place to go if you're interested in Run for Something is runforsomething.net. For like very frequent updates, go to us on Twitter. We're just Run for Something. I'm on Twitter, just Amanda Litman. Probably on it too much. Those are all great places to find us. And if you prefer email, hello@runforsomething.net. If you are the kind of person who joins this kind of lunch, you are the kind of person who should run for office. So I really do hope you consider it.
That's great. I said earlier, we still want to get you to campus. You know, this past January over the winter break, we had a week-long campaign school.
I love that.
And we hope we can do it again in 2021. And so I'm extending, you don't have to answer, but I'm extending the invitation now to invite you to be a guest instructor when we do our campaign school in 2021. Jen O'Malley Dillon actually came up for it this past January. But with that, I want to thank everyone who joined us today, especially students. Thanks to our guest, Amanda Litman. This has been really wonderful, and you're doing a great job. So I just want to acknowledge it, and I can see you ought to think about running for something. But anyhow, thanks for the great work. To everyone watching, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more events and opportunities like this. Check out our website, tischcollege.tufts.edu. We hope to, even over the summer, to have some more virtual events. And again, Amanda, thank you very much. And everybody stay safe and healthy. And have a great day. Bye now.
Bye.